Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Charlie Schwedler. I am the Executive Director of Senior Services in Midland County and part of the MCVAN network, and we're going to talk about the MCVAN network today and talk about several things in regard to vulnerable adults. With me are these fantastic folks that have joined the MCVAN network, and they're going to tell you who they are and why they have joined us. So, Amy.
I'm Amy Bailey. I'm from My Michigan Health. I'm a social worker, and I'm also the advanced care planning specialist for our health system. My Michigan Health serves many vulnerable adults, and that's why I'm part of the network.
Hi, I'm Krista Milholland. I'm an attorney at Weiler Law Group. And in my practice, I focus on elder law and estate planning. And for that reason, I really appreciate being a member of the MCVAN group. I rely on all of the folks seated around me at different times to help my clients get the best outcomes.
Hello, my name's J.D. Brooks. I'm the Midland County Prosecuting Attorney. We helped co-found the MCVAN group, which is the Midland County Vulnerable Adult Network, in 2015 because we were very concerned seeing a big increase in these types of cases. We wanted to come together and see what we could do to help prevent the harms from occurring and also to make sure that those that commit the harms are held accountable.
Hi, my name is Steve Wixon. I am the Midland County Public Guardian. I love being part of the MCVAN group because I serve the vulnerable adult population in Midland County, so it's very important for us to get together, discuss these cases, and how we can better assist people.
Hi, I am Community Relations Officer Sequin, and I am part of the MCVAN team because obviously we take the cases for vulnerable adult abuse or exploitation, and we are coming together to try and prevent these from happening.
Well, fantastic. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being part of this network. And one thing that we want to really convey to folks is that there is a community of people out here to help you. And to help vulnerable adults, and so we want to make sure that they understand the different safety nets that are in place and the different ways that they can find some help. Just a couple of stats here. That in this past year, more than 73,000 older adults in Michigan were victims of abuse. 58% were done by a relative, and so that's a scary stat there. So it says 1 in 10 older adults are victims of scams. And so we're going to talk some about scams and how to prevent that. And then elder fraud, and this is amazing. Elder fraud in America costs $6.3 billion. That is just amazing. And so we want to talk about what can we do to prevent this from happening from a loved one and to prevent and to help people when something does happen. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with Amy, and I have a few questions I'll be asking some folks. So Amy, you mentioned your role. Why is identifying a trusted decision maker for medical decisions and creating a legal document important for folks?
Well, it's very important because in Michigan we do not have a next of kin law with regards to making medical decisions for another adult. And so anyone age 18 or older should really consider creating a legal document that names a patient advocate. I'd also like to point out that sometimes those individuals that are most closely related to us are really not the ones that should be making medical decisions for us when we're unable to make them, either due to their own incapacity or at times they don't have our best interests in mind.
One thing you mentioned is that, 18 or older, and I think that's really important. Oftentimes we think of those decisions being made by folks that are more advanced in their years, but everyone needs to do this, don't they?
Absolutely. We're trying to avoid pigeonholing this legal document for end of life. There could be times in your life when momentarily you're unable to make a decision, such as the result of an auto accident or during a surgery. So this is not an end-of-life document. This is a document that names someone who can speak on your behalf if you're unable to.
So what does a designation of patient advocate / durable power of attorney for healthcare legal document do?
It Michigan is one of 3 states that does not have a law regarding living wills. So our document identifies the patient advocate. Any preferences for care that are listed in that document are for the patient advocate to interpret, along with any discussions they've had with the patient leading up to their incapacity. I've talked to a lot of community members, and sometimes they view this document as their do not resuscitate, and it's not. That's a medical order available to our community members. But unlike other states, this document simply names the patient advocate, and so the patient advocate must give consent for care when the patient is unable to.
Okay, great. So when does this document become active?
The document only becomes active after the patient has been evaluated by either 2 physicians or a physician and a licensed psychologist. They must put that determination, it must be written, it must be made part of the medical record. And also I'd like to add that the patient advocate should have a copy of that determination, because our patients do not live in the hospital or in an outpatient physician office. They live in our community. So other entities such as skilled nursing facilities, assisted livings, they need to see proof of why our patient is unable to make a decision. Also, this determination must be reviewed not less than annually, and it can be revoked. That's also a very good point.
Okay. So, Krista, this kind of crosses a lot of what you're involved
She's singing
with.
my song. Yes, absolutely. I'm all for that. Yes, and everyone over 18 needs one. I could not agree more.
So, what can be done legally to protect someone from being exploited?
I think where it all has to start is that, as you mentioned, even when you're 18, you have to consider the fact that there's going to likely be a time in your life when you are vulnerable. And in order to protect yourself as a vulnerable person, there are things you can put in place so that the right person is there to act for you as your agent when you need them, rather than the person that comes forward. Right. Often the person that comes forward is not the right person. So to that end, not only doing what Amy mentioned, the patient advocate, but also having a financial power of attorney, someone that you know you can trust to stand in your shoes and make your financial decisions for you when you are not able to do so.
I imagine that happens a lot, doesn't it? Where you come in a little bit, JD, is when the wrong person does step forward.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As you mentioned, it's often a relative or somebody in a trusted relationship with the victim, and that's what's so unfortunate about it, is the person who's committing it will have control of the person's finances and records, and basically can prevent the discovery of it. That's why we really treat it as a form of domestic violence, where it's being committed by a known person in a trusted relationship, taking advantage of people.
Excellent. So we always talk about wills. Okay. So always. I'm an old guy, so I talk about wills. You ain't getting nothing. That's what I tell my kids. Anyway, so what's the difference between a power of attorney and an advocate, patient advocate designation? How's that different than a will?
Well, both the patient advocate and the financial power of attorney are only good while you're alive. The minute your heart stops beating, that is no longer valid. So a will takes over your intentions for your estate after you pass away. That's the difference between. So they really need to be 3 separate documents.
Okay. So do you have to name your spouse or child as your agent under financial power of attorney or a patient advocate designation? Does it have to be your spouse?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You know, a lot of it lends itself to that because they are your trusted people most of the time, and they, are aware of your situation. But a lot of times it's the worst possible person to name. If your spouse, for instance, is homebound, they're not going to be able to run around and help you with your finances. And if your spouse would keep you being treated at a hospital beyond what you would choose because they don't want to lose you, then they're not the right person to name under your patient advocate. So, okay. And children, the dynamics with families are so complex, but certainly there are certain children that should not be named as your financial power of attorney.
Okay, all right. Any other thoughts on what these two folks have said, or anything else we want to talk about with that?
We just, you always think of things after something bad happens is when you think of, oh, I should have done this or that. We don't like to think about the bad things that can happen, but we all know they do happen. And so, you know, prevention, as they say, is worth a pound or even more of cure.
Yeah.
So definitely helps to plan ahead.
So one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about in the news lately is something called the Elder Abuse Task Force. And I know you're part of that, JD, and we're really fortunate that you are. What is it, and what do we hope to have accomplished by this task force?
So the task force was established in 2019. It's actually a collaborative effort that was started by the Michigan Supreme Court and the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office has really taken the lead in it. It's basically a collaborative team that involves people from the courts, from law enforcement, adult protective services. As you mentioned, I serve as a representative of the Prosecutors Association, and then a number of adult service agencies. We came together. The primary purposes were to promote and help pass new legislation such as the FEPA Act, guardianship and conservator having greater regulations and reporting requirements, because it was found that a lot of the exploitation was taking place in those circumstances. We've proposed a statutory power of attorney to help prevent some of the abuses that happen with those relationships, and also a new law deals with medical surrogates, dealing exactly with what Amy and what we were talking about, having a limited appointment for somebody that can help you with medical decisions, but not necessarily taking over all your finances or your housing placements, things of that nature.
You know, it's interesting. Anytime we talk about things, we wouldn't be worth our salt if we didn't have an acronym in there. And so we already had one, and so let's back up just a little bit. FEPA. What is FEPA, and what is that? How does that help?
So FEPA is the Financial Exploitation Prevention Act. It became effective in September of 2021. The idea was, the purpose of it was to help prevent or at least stop ongoing financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. What it does is it requires, right now, financial institutions, banks, and credit unions to have policies and procedures in place so that their workers are trained in things to look for financial exploitation. When all of a sudden a vulnerable adult showing up with a new person, a stranger, and they're making a bunch of cash withdrawals or adding people to their accounts that don't seem to have any legitimate purpose or relationship, they're supposed to look out for those things, and when they see those things, report it. Report it either to APS, Adult Protective Services, another acronym.
Yep. And you've seen that. Slide. How you can do that. I believe you've seen that already, and we'll show that to you again at the end. I'm sorry.
Nope, that's fine. Or to the police department, and you can report it to both of them or to your local prosecutor's office. APS then works with the police, and they have 10 days to conduct at least an initial investigation. It's not necessarily completed, but within 10 days, they have to pass the information on to the prosecutor's office. And the idea, again, is that we can take a look at that and then see, is there something we need to do immediately to help prevent further losses? So we can start working with private counsel, such as Carissa. We actually worked on a case with her and with the probate court where they actually got a freeze on somebody who had emptied an elderly gentleman's bank accounts over $100,000, had them converted to a bunch of cashier checks, and then we were able to put a freeze and recover most of that money, over $85,000. So that's really what it's about. It even allows the financial institutions to temporarily freeze accounts where they have reason to believe that exploitation is going on until somebody can come in and take a look and decide whether or not these are legitimate transactions or not. And it's worked. It's caused a great increase in reporting of financial exploitation and also for assignment for formal investigation.
You know, one thing that we've seen, and we all work together on a lot of these things. Some things that aren't even looked at as, you know, there might be more physical, it would seem to be physical abuse, but in a lot of ways they're financial abuse, because what happens is, well, Mom, you don't need that medicine anymore, right? That medicine is just, it's too expensive and you really don't need that anymore. Well, that means there's more money being siphoned off, and we've all seen that happen. Let's turn a little bit to scams, just real quickly, because scams are a big thing, and some of them are tried and true, and I know you get called on scams probably
all the time.
daily, you know, hourly, whatever. But what are some of the more popular scams that are going on these days?
Well, what we always tell people, and part of the task force, by the way, is about public awareness and promoting individuals of the things to look out for. And we often like to say, if you see something or hear something, say something. And we're very fortunate that our law enforcement in Midland County will even do wellness checks. If you suspect something's going on, call 911, let the police go out and check it out. Many times it turns out to be no problem, and that's great, everybody's good. But often it does lead to reporting of suspected abuse. But we tell, in terms of things to look out for, if somebody's asking you to pay something by gift card, some supposedly legitimate debt, that's a scam. Legitimate businesses don't take payment in gift cards. If you get a call or contact somebody saying, many times it's supposedly somebody from the IRS or from the courts, you didn't show up for jury duty, you have to make an immediate payment to us or somebody's going to arrest you. That's a scam. The police don't work that way. They don't come out and say, or make contact and say, you have to pay money right away or you're going to be arrested. You may get a call. Social media is, you know, it can be a very useful thing and it can be a very abusive thing. And so people, these scammers find out about people, your friends, your relatives. They call somebody up and they say, somebody needs immediate medical care. We need to get your bank account information to transfer money to the hospital. So they'll provide immediate medical care. Well, Amy will tell you, I think that's not how they work. They don't do that. Or it may be that they've been arrested and they're not going to be able to bond out until they see the judge next week unless you immediately transfer funds. That's a scam. Also, utility companies. You get a call from the utility company, we're going to cut off your power, your payment hasn't gone through, cutting off your power right now if you don't immediately authorize an online or telephone payment. Again, utility companies don't work that way. That's likely a scam.
Yeah. What have you seen those, and what others maybe would you add to that?
We have seen a lot of phone scams. So what they like to do is play the heartstrings. Like JD said, they'll call, say, hey, you know, they'll pretend you're the grandson or granddaughter. Hey, I'm in trouble. I need money immediately, or they're going to hold me in jail. And that's where the process starts, with gift cards or trying to transfer money. We also see some computer scams where they pretend to be, you know, your computer's down and they try to hack into the computer, and then they start processing, trying to play the heartstrings again. So that's kind of, like JD said, a lot of it's phone scams. So yeah.
Yeah. So knowledge is power, as these things go, and we want to make
Definitely.
sure that people know. Yeah, I heard something recently, and maybe I'm even stealing it, so I apologize. But I heard this: slam the scam. In other words, if they start into something, just hang. In fact, hang up really hard. You know, you'll feel better if you just slam that phone down. I think that's how you're going to feel better. So
But be careful with your cell phones.
Yes. Toss this. Yeah, that's good. That's probably, I guess that's a landline only thing. Okay. A landline, for those of you who don't know. Anyway, is, anyhow, let's talk about some cases that maybe just in general, obviously, that we have worked together on. One of the things about this group is that, you know, we sign a confidentiality agreement so that we can work together. We all work, and we have other partners. You know, the ARC and Disability Network and Shelter House and folks that are on MCVAN. So we all are dealing with vulnerable adults. So what are some things that we have done in the past, since 2015, almost 10 years now, that we have done together, and it's because of this group that we've been able to do that?
Yeah, I mentioned the one case that we dealt with Chris on that was really significant. We had an elderly gentleman, his wife had passed away. He was dependent on his wife, as we all are, to help out with chores around the house, with paying bills, things of that nature. Excuse me. He was contacted by this woman who said she would help out. Eventually, she was allowed to come live in his house. She kind of played on his heartstring, didn't have a place to stay. She was allowed to come in the house, help take care of things, help with shopping, bills, finances. And then all of a sudden, the family started to realize they got some information that where he had quite a bit in life savings left was starting to be drastically reduced very quickly. And it was reported to Adult Protective Services. That worker got involved, immediately contacted law enforcement. It was Scott Holzinger, a detective with the sheriff's office. They did a quick assessment, came to me. We found out what was going on, got banking information. We actually did a search warrant, went out and drilled open a safety deposit box that this woman and her mother had recently taken out. It turned out they had removed some cashier's checks, over $100,000 worth, like a couple of days before that. Fortunately, Carissa, her firm, and Carissa herself got involved with the situation. We coordinated with her, gave her information that she was able to take to the probate court and order a freeze on these cashier checks before they were cashed. And as I mentioned, there were over $85,000 of those, which we actually got frozen. We ended up charging the person. They were convicted in court, restitution order, and we were able to recoup quite a bit of the potential losses in that case.
That's fantastic. And again, just working together.
I've worked several cases with law enforcement and APS where we've gotten just horrible things that have happened to people. Primarily, the most notable one was a lady that was tied to her bed in the basement and was kept there, wasn't allowed communication with her family, and she was giving certain prescription drugs to keep her subdued for a period of time. And like JD was saying, they continued, they siphoned off of her retirement account and took a sizable amount of money. So now, even though the client has passed away, we continue to collect restitution for that person and give it to her nieces and nephews every year. So while it doesn't make her whole anymore, it's something, and it's a privilege to be part of that.
I've been able to, Steve helped me out a lot. We had an assisted living came forward and said that one of their residents was in the hospital and she had no family and she did not have a patient advocate in place. And for that reason, she kept being resuscitated. And she really was, really wanting to pass away and really, she wasn't cognitively all there. So I was able to bring Steve in and so that he could be appointed guardian, and it happened in a real quick way. He was able to sign a DNR on her behalf, and I think she passed away the next day. So even, we just have a wonderful community that works together, I think, to give as much dignity as possible to everyone, because we want to be treated like that when we're there. So I really do appreciate this group, and APS isn't represented here today, but they play a big part in it.
Huge role. Huge role. We work really hard with them. They just were unable to be here today. But they are really a linchpin to this whole thing. So we do appreciate that as well. So what if I am concerned about something? What kind of different types of vulnerable adult abuse can I report to you, to 911, to the police?
So there is a
Sheriff's
wide
Department?
variety. There is emotional or mental, maybe they're absolute change in behavior, it's just little red flags that you're going to start noticing. Also to the finances, you're going to see finances or cash is going to be missing. There's also physical abuse where, if they're in a home, every time an incident occurs, they should be contacting the police to report something. If you're not getting contacted and you're seeing, bruises or, heaven forbid, broken bones, those are big red flags that you shouldn't be avoiding. So those are all different signs.
Okay, great. So what steps could I do to protect myself, being the old man that I am, to protect myself, or for us to help protect other members of our families? What can we do?
So as a family member, just making sure those steps in, we're contacting other groups, making sure that, wills are in place, power of attorney, making sure the appropriate people are there, those who are not going to abuse it. Once again, we love our loved ones, but sometimes they're not always the best for us to make those final decisions. So just having that in place, and then as a person, being aware, know these things. If someone's calling you, asking for gift cards, red flags, know all the red flags. Just be very secure with your finances and the things that you're trying to do. So.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned several things already about what, the red flags that we can look for. What about things that are, I guess either self-inflicted or there's just, something is going on, say like hoarding or unable to maintain proper hygiene. Should I report that as well?
Definitely. So there is such thing as self-neglect. We do have cases where we get called out. Once again, we get called out for well-being checks, and they'll say, hey, so-and-so has been inside. We haven't seen them. We're concerned either for a neighbor or a family member or a friend. So we go out there, and if we're seeing these things where, their hygiene, personal hygiene isn't there, they just can't provide the care they need for themselves, or they are hoarding, that's when we're going to call Adult Protective Services, and they'll start an investigation from there. So.
Yeah, that's where they can really help out. It's not just a question necessarily of somebody else exploiting or hurting them, but just that they need services, and that's where APS can coordinate that and even involve your agency. And
right. I was just going to say, if you're a little bit concerned about calling, 911 right away or whatever, there are other avenues. APS is one. Calling services like ours. Find someone that you trust, that you can trust, and we can run with that a little bit. We can get the APS involved. We can get the police involved in those kinds of things.
I was just going to say, I think our the neighboring initiative that Midland has going on right now is huge, because if you know your neighbors, you will be attuned to their needs, and you'll pick up on something like that. And, not to be Gladys Kravitz or something, but just to be like a concerned, to know that there's something going on there and that person needs some additional help.
Right.
So I think that our neighbors serve a huge role in our community in trying to help those who maybe don't have a lot of family around to help.
That's great. That's great. Speaking of additional help, okay. So Steve, what is the role of the Midland Public Guardian Office? What's your role?
Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'd like to start off by saying first that a lot of the things that have already been discussed are ways to bypass guardianship in people like me. So if you have power of attorney in place and people to make your decisions for you, and that works out and those people are suitable, that's the preferred method to go about things. We serve the vulnerable adult population of Midland that are deemed legally incapacitated. And what that means is that there's been a notification, a petition, a hearing and testimony, a guardian ad litem investigation, and a hearing, and a judge to deem somebody legally incapacitated. And those are who we serve. It's primarily the mentally ill population. We have a lot of people with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, a lot of people with dementia, just to name a few diagnoses. And those are primarily the people we serve.
Okay. And just a note that we're seeing, and I'm sure we're all seeing this as well, is that because we have an aging population throughout the country, but in Midland County, as because we're speaking about Midland County, we're having folks that have maybe some cognitive issues already, plus they're aging, and so maybe dementia is on top of something that they have, and it really can complicate issues. And so the sooner you can put protections in place, like we've been talking about, before some of those things happen, the better for that vulnerable adult.
And we have people that are incapacitated for many different reasons, right? Often there's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse mixed with things like that. So it's definitely a complicating factor, adds to it.
So why is it necessary for a guardian to exist, for your office to exist?
Well, we're here as like a backstop. We get calls every week for assistance, asking to help out loved ones, and from the hospital and from different attorneys' offices where there's a need because there's no suitable person to serve. So there are people that are not, that don't have the capacity to do so, but we're there as a backstop when those things happen.
Okay. So we've been speaking a lot about finances. As guardian, are you responsible for the finances of that person as well, once you become their guardian?
Not necessarily. If somebody doesn't have any assets, it's a pretty simple deal where as guardian you can apply to be rep payee, and that's usually what we do when there's no other benefits but government benefits involved. If it goes further than that, if people have cars, houses, investments, life insurance, that's when we go the conservatorship route. And in that case, an inventory would need to be prepared and a yearly accounting turned into the court with bank statements and things like that to protect people's assets.
So as you can see, that there's a lot going on, and there are a lot of helps out there. Sometimes you just have to be willing to reach out and get some help. I mean, that's one of the big things. Is there anything else anyone would like to add as we close this down?
I'd like to share that with the patient advocate designation, it's important that you revisit that document. I tell individuals that they should use it as a discussion tool with their loved ones. These documents do not expire, but they can be revoked. And that's important to note. Sometimes people think this is a one-way street. They're always able to identify a different patient advocate and create a new document. A lot of times people like to file these away in a locked file cabinet, and then they come to the hospital and we can't find that document, and neither can their loved ones. And I've also been asked by some individuals, some younger adults, how do I get my parents to create this document? They really need to create this document. And I share with them, well, I think it would be great if you were to share your patient advocate designation, have a sit-down discussion with mom and dad and say, hey, I wanted to show you what I've created, and here's a blank copy, because we do have blank copies of these documents at My Michigan. We also have trained facilitators to help in the process. You just need to give us a call.
And those are good wherever, like if you're in some other county.
Yep, anywhere in the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
Yep, and other health systems have their own created documents. Those are accepted in our health system as well. We even recognize out-of-state documents that comply with our Michigan state law.
Charlie, I would just like to say that obviously, as we talked about, the physical abuse and neglect are the most horrific cases where we see people actually held as prisoners in their own home and not being properly taken care of. But even with the financial exploitation, which there are more of those, those aren't just simple property crimes. It's not just a loss of money. They have emotional impacts. They have people can be afraid of the people that are stealing from them. They can be ashamed, embarrassed. They spent their whole life saving up for their retirement, and then all of a sudden somebody steals that from them. So those also are pretty horrific circumstances, and I think it's all up to all of us to try to help prevent that.
Yes.
Also, I'd like to say too, following up on what JD was saying, it's important to have transparency with your finances, because even though you have these documents put in place, we've had situations where powers of attorney have need to be removed in favor of me being conservator as exploitation was taking place with those documents. So we've had clients who are taking care of parents' banking and siphoning money every month from them, and just telling the parents, don't worry about your bills, I've got it handled. So it was under their understanding that things were being taken care of and they were being exploited. So it's important to have other people also in the mix to make it transparent.
The last thing I'd like to say is that we're one of the main tenets of MCVAN, the original acronym for the day, the Midland County Vulnerable Adult Network, is education. We will do this on the road. We will come to you. We will meet. You know, sometimes it's like herding cats, getting this group together, but we will try. And as many of us that can make it will be there. We will talk to anyone, anytime about any of this. And again, call someone, prevent it, and then if something does happen, we can help then too. So again, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful day.